Okay, hello everyone, I'm back. Truth be told, I lost my mic. I don't know where it went to. So I guess I have to contend with the audio from the GoPro today. I'll just be reading a book called. Okay, so other than reading a Substack article today, I will be reading this book that I just bought. I think it's one of the books on the JP recommended by JP Morgan. And yeah, I saw this at Kinokuniya and I was like, if I saw the book, I think I will buy it. Yeah, so today we'll be reading it for 15 minutes. I will, as usual, be working on my articulation and enunciation. And at the end of it, I will try to summarize what I learned and maybe 3 takeaways that all of you can have. Okay, so the first chapter is Burn the Cabin Down. Creativity, the generation of new and useful ideas, is at the heart of nearly everything that humans do. It provides the lens through which we examine our own existence in art, music, and literature. It is the engine that drives better and more efficient solutions in science and technology, propelling our species forward. But at some point, the creative engine breaks down. We begin generating ideas that are not so new or not so useful. Perhaps we are unable to generate anything at all. As the journalist Gene Fowler once said, "Writing is easy. All you do is sit staring at the blank sheet of paper until the drops of blood form on your forehead." And it's not just writers or artists who experience creative blocks. We could just as easily talk about biologists' block, entrepreneurs' block, or engineers' block. So what do you do when you hit a creative block? Where do you go? As I write this, my 2-year-old daughter is running around the house oscillating between hysterical screaming and maniacal laughter. My ideal location in this moment, to use my daughter's words, away. But where do you go in a perfect world? Close your eyes and imagine the place. Where is it and where does it look like? Who are you with? If you are like many people, your mind races to the woods, and not just any location in the woods. More likely than not, it's a small cabin, secluded and quiet. There you sit, alone with your thoughts, waiting for that moment of brilliance. Something new, something bold, something unlike anything anyone has ever seen. A sudden bolt of lightning that causes you to jump up and begin furiously typing or sloshing paint on canvas. You wait for your inner creative potential, the perfect idea, to finally be unlocked. Most of us don't have an isolated cabin in the woods, and even if we did, we probably couldn't find the uninterrupted time to use it. But the image is nonetheless powerful. Even if we can't get away in the literal sense, the view of creativity still influences our behavior. Maybe instead of going to a cabin in the woods, you isolate yourself. Perhaps you see your friends or colleagues less. You buy noise-cancelling headphones or a fancy notebook, reserved for deep thoughts only. You turn to books that say to conquer your fears, become more courageous, or engage in deep, self-reflective analysis. And maybe, if you are like many people, you start to feel that twinge of anxiety if nothing brilliant comes. You begin to question yourself as you try even harder to unlock your inner genius. The problem with this approach to creativity is not that it is impractical or that it makes us feel bad. The problem is that this whole way of thinking is simply wrong. Those behaviors, isolating oneself, limiting outside influences, cutting off communication, do not make most of us more creative. In fact, it is the opposite behavior and a completely opposite way of thinking that are more likely to succeed. Take the myth of Henry Thoreau's Weldon, perhaps the most famous isolated cabin in the woods. Thoreau's Weldon is often romanticized as the ultimate retreat for deep solitude thought. The reality, however, is that Weldon's pond was less than half a mile from Concord, Massachusetts. Wow. Torrio threw dinner parties that I don't know how to pronounce that word. It's this one. Torrio threw dinner parties, and he regularly walked to town to visit with family and fellow authors like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne. He even threw an annual melon party which featured his famous homegrown watermelons. Isolated, he was not. So burn it down. The isolated cabin, the inner genius, the anxiety and guilt, all of it. So I think the gist of this part, or the main takeaway that I have, is that if you want to be more creative, basically stop limiting yourself. Don't think that you have to go somewhere else to seek creativity, but instead burn and get rid of the idea of a fixed place where you are able to find the creativity. Go out there and don't let yourself be limited by it. And I think that is not something that I super relate to. I don't really see a cabin in the woods, but I'm always waiting for that spark of creativity to come, and I feel that it has to be in a certain place. So perhaps my most immediate reflection right here is that don't wait or don't hinge the creative spark on a singular place, but maybe expand and remove the notion of creativity being a fixed spot. Yeah, burn it down. The way we think about creativity has a profound effect on how we approach it in our daily lives. Consider a fascinating study that identified a key factor distinguishing creative professionals, successful musicians and actors from the general population. Their beliefs about creativity itself. Creative professionals are more likely to view creativity as a skill that can be developed rather than an inborn marker of genius. And they reject common myths about creativity that many embrace, like that breakthroughs come from sudden inspiration, or that people are their most creative when they are given no constraint. The reason why we can be so quick to hold ourselves accountable when our creative pursuits do not live up to expectations is because we view those new ideas as coming from within. They are our creations, our inventions, entities that we manifest according to our own knowledge and will. But what if we turn that focus inside out? What if we instead think of ideas as entities that are external to us, things that we find, respond to, and manipulate rather than conjure out of thin air? What if we approach the creative process as an opportunity for discovery and the failure to arrive at new ideas not as a failure to generate, but as an invitation to learn and explore? Explore, then exploit. Throughout this book, we will examine creativity across lots of different fields and industries, encountering many great ideas along the way. Let's begin by examining the career of Jackson Pollock, the iconic 20th century American painter, most recognizable for his strip paintings. Pollock began painting in his early 20s when he moved to New York City to live with his brother. For the next decade, he experimented with various styles ranging from abstract art to surrealism to mural paintings. Eventually, his work caught the eye of the notable collector and socialite Peggy Guggenheim, and the two became friends. In 1945, Guggenheim lent Pollock the money to purchase a farmhouse in Long Island. Her hope was that with a change of scenery would help Pollock recover from his struggles with alcoholism. Shortly after his move to Long Island, Pollock began experimenting with the drip technique. His style crystallized in 1947, and by 1949, Life magazine catapulted Pollock to fame, asking if he was the greatest living painter in the United States. Then, just a year later, at the peak of his notoriety, Pollock mostly abandoned his strip technique and returned to experimenting with different styles until his death in 1956. The brief synopsis of Pollock's life may seem familiar: a talented, struggling artist unlocking his inner brilliance and forever changing art. But the tools of cognitive science have revealed surprising patterns about Pollock and his work. Patterns that are true not only of Pollock, but also of creatives across a wide variety of industries. These patterns challenge the conventional wisdom that great ideas come from within. I think I will stop here for a bit to talk about my own observations. I realized that this is a phenomenon quite widely seen in the creative industry, especially on TikTok. Usually people will explore what they are like, and explore the best type of content that they can use to go viral. And once they have found it, they usually capitalize on it. And just like Pollock, usually after the hype, usually it tends to go away, the hype tends to fade away. And usually creatives, if they continue with what they are doing, it does not really lead to a sense of novelty, and then they go back to exploring. So I think that TikTok and creatives that trending trends, immediate fame, all of these are expedited form of hype content. In the past, probably without social media, it takes longer to marinate, it takes longer for content to become viral, and that trend can probably last for a long time. In this case, Pollock's drip technique lasted for about 2 years, but in reality, for a hype content now, usually it lasts over about 2 months. So I think the underlying philosophy remains the same, and a tip that I would say that I would take away is that explore what you are like, explore what you like to do, and then exploit it afterwards. The hot streak Jackson Pollock painted for 2 decades, but if you look closely, nearly all Pollock's iconic drip paintings were produced during a relatively brief window of time, a 3-year stretch that lasted from 1947 to 1950. Once Pollock landed on the idea of the drip painting and it crystallized, the spark quickly gave rise to dozens of paintings that he produced in quick succession. A great idea took hold and propelled him forward. What's remarkable is that this hot streak pattern isn't unique to Pollock or visual artists. In 2018, a team of researchers led by Darshan Wang at Northwestern University found that among artists, scientists, and filmmakers, hot streaks are not the exception. They are the norm. When the research team analyzed the careers of roughly 30,000 creatives, they found that in over 90% of cases, there was evidence of a hot streak. The person arrived at a breakthrough idea and then quickly produced a flurry of related work. Winning beggared winning. And this was true regardless of domain. In other words, a great idea isn't necessarily a one-time event, but more of a pivotal concept or insight that ignites a string of connected hits. Now, why does this challenge the conventional view of creativity? The popular narrative tells us that creative genius springs from natural talent and inner wisdom and inner vision. Great ideas come from precious light bulb moments. But what the research showed is that hitting a hot streak is not predicted by one's age, past successes, or even notoriety. Instead, it boils down to a deceptively simple 3-word formula: explore, then exploit. Creativity often begins in a messy, frustrating phase of searching. You experiment with false starts, chase down flimsy connections, and hit dead ends. But then, if you are lucky, something clicks. You stumble upon an idea that feels right, and that's when it's time to exploit. You shift gears from searching to executing. This is the work that turns a spark of inspiration into a blazing success. When the Northwestern researchers looked at the data, they found that hot streaks closely followed this exploration to exploitation pattern. Artists, scientists, and filmmakers alike first went through a period of intense exploration before they zeroed in on a single idea and pushed it to its fullest potential. And the data was clear. Neither exploration nor exploitation alone could spark a hot streak. It was a sequence, the precise interplay between these two phases, that made all the difference. This pattern tells us something profound about creative breakthroughs. When creatives hit a hot streak, it's not as if they're suddenly endowed with innate genius. Rather, they have discovered a particularly fertile idea or approach, which in turn propels a concentrated period of creative outputs. And these streaks do not emerge by chance, nor do they come from deep personal reflection. They come from exploration, sifting through possibilities until something clicks that reveals not just one idea but a whole new territory to explore. Creative success isn't about waiting for genius to strike. It's about searching widely until you find an idea worth mining. And yeah, I think this all falls back down to the idea of explore, then exploit. Find something that like it's okay, like everything starts out in the exploration phase. Go ham, go wild, explore, and eventually once you find something that hits, always capitalize on it and to double down, and that's how you succeed with great ideas. This is first day of reading. I think pretty good so far. I think one thing that I struggle with is in these kind of self-help books, how do I turn this into actual like content, or like how do I actually practice what I learned. So yeah, either way I think it's a pretty good book so far, and I'll probably start reading different chapters. I'll do subtext once in a while, and yeah, cheers to that. See you for tomorrow.